The shuttle touched down on the landing pad with a sharp hiss of steam. Commander Threx stood at the door, his three-fingered hands tightening on the strap of his bag. His orders were simple: observe the humans. Write a report. Leave. It should have been easy. He had fought in 17 wars. He had led troops against the war beasts of Korath Prime and the siege fleets of the Iron Spiral. Nothing surprised him anymore. Or so he thought. The ramp lowered. A heavy smell hit him. Sweat, oil, and something sharp in the air. Not the clean metallic scent of most military bases. This smelled alive. Beyond the steam, the human military academy loomed like a fortress. Dark walls of steel. Guard towers at each corner. It looked less like a school and more like a prison built for giants. A human officer in black armor waited at the bottom of the ramp. He had no helmet, no smile, only cold eyes that measured Threx in one glance. "Commander." "Threx?" the man said. "Yes," Threx replied. The officer nodded once. "Follow me." No welcome, no polite exchange. Threx walked behind him, boots echoing on the metal floor. The walls were lined with banners, not colorful symbols, but battle-scarred. Flags, some torn and burned. Each one had strange human writing and dates that stretched back centuries. Inside, the sound hit him first. Shouts, the pounding of boots, the metallic crash of weapons. Then, a scream. It wasn't a cry of pain, like he'd heard in battle. It was a deep, raw sound that made his frills tighten. The officer didn't react. He just kept walking. They passed an open training hall. Threx slowed. He couldn't help but look. Inside, a group of young humans, barely adults, were running through an obstacle course. It wasn't like the simulated courses of the galactic fleets. This one was brutal. Spiked barriers, walls slick with oil, pits filled with freezing water. One cadet slipped on the oil wall, fell backward, and landed hard on their shoulder. Threx stepped forward instinctively. But the human instructor, a tall woman with a scar running from cheek to neck, only shouted, "Get up or stay down forever." The cadet gritted their teeth, rolled to their feet, and kept climbing, arm hanging limp. Threx's translator unit flickered at the tone of the words, struggling to match them to proper galactic standard. Some phrases simply had no translation. What is this?" Threx muttered. The officer glanced back. "Warm up." Threx froze. Warm up? This was how they started training? They moved on. The corridors were filled with strange human smells. Antiseptic mixed with blood, hot metal, and something sweet and bitter at once. They reached a large steel door. The officer pressed his palm to a scanner. The door hissed open. Inside was the command hall. Dozens of holoscreens filled the room, each showing different parts of the academy. Shooting ranges, sparring rings, classrooms filled with glowing maps of alien worlds. At the far end stood a man in an old-style officer's coat, hands behind his back. His hair was white, his face weathered, but his eyes were alive and sharp. "Commander Threx," the man said in a deep voice. "I am Commander Howe. You're here to observe our methods. You'll get full access." Threx nodded respectfully. "I appreciate your cooperation. I will report my findings to the Galactic Alliance." Hale's lips twitched into something almost like a smile. "Report what you see, if you survive long enough to understand it." Threx tilted his head. "I am not here to participate, only to watch." Hale turned to one of the screens, the one showing the obstacle course. "Observation here isn't passive. You learn by doing. My cadets wouldn't respect an alien who hides behind glass." "I am a commander of the Vakari fleet," Threx said, trying to keep his tone calm. "I have fought in real wars." Then you'll fit right in," Hale interrupted. He pressed a button on the console. Somewhere far below, a loud alarm blared. On the screen, the obstacle course instructor looked up, then shouted something. Cadets turned toward the camera, Toward him, Holly looked Threx in the eye. "You're going in." Threx blinked. "I am not." The steel door behind him slammed shut. The next thing he knew, Threx was standing in the cold, open training yard. Dozens of human cadets surrounded him. They were panting, sweating, their uniforms covered in mud and blood. Instructor with the scar stepped forward. "This is Commander Threx from the Galactic Alliance. He's here to observe." Her smile was sharp. "Let's make sure he sees everything up close." The cadets grinned, not friendly grins. Predatory. Threx adjusted his jacket. "Very well. I will watch from..." "Run," the instructor said. "What?" "Run, now." The whistle blew. Before Threx could react, a wall of human bodies surged forward. They weren't attacking him, not yet, but they were pushing him into the course. Mud splashed up to his knees. Something sharp cut into his calf. He looked. Down, barbed wire. A cadet grabbed his arm and yanked him forward. "Move or you'll get trampled, alien." Threx stumbled, caught himself, and ran. The ground was slick, the air filled with shouts. A pit opened ahead, water dark and freezing. Humans dove in without hesitation. Threx's mind screamed at. The insanity in Vakari training. You avoided dangerous terrain. Here, they threw themselves into it. He tried to jump across. Almost made it. Icy water swallowed him to the chest. The shock punched the breath from his lungs. A human cadet beside him grinned through chattering teeth. "Not bad for your first jump." They hauled themselves out and kept going. The next obstacle was a low tunnel of metal, half filled with mud. Cadets crawled through at high speed. Threx hesitated. The space was too small for his frame. A boot kicked him in the back. "Move, alien." He dropped to his elbows and crawled. The mud smelled of rust and rot. Something squirmed under his hand, a living creature. He didn't look. By the time he emerged, his clothes were soaked. His frills heavy with filth. The final stretch was a climb up a wall slick with oil. Cadets leapt, clawed, pulled each other up. When Threx slipped back down, a cadet above him grabbed his wrist and hauled him up with a strength that shocked him. They collapsed at the top, breathing hard. The instructor's voice cut through the air. "Not bad, alien. You survived warm-up." Warm-up. Threx's muscles burned. His chest ached. And this was just the start. Later, in the barracks, Threx sat on the edge of a narrow bunk. The cadets laughed, patched their own cuts with strips of cloth, rubbed strange ointments into bruises. No medics came. No rest was offered. A young cadet sat beside him. "You did okay," she said. "Most first-timers vomit halfway through." Threx tried to reply, but his throat was still raw from the cold water. "Don't worry," she added with a grin. "Tomorrow is worse." "Worse?" he managed. "Yeah," she said, leaning closer. "Tomorrow is first break day." Threx frowned. "What is that?" Her grin widened. "You'll see." That night, as he lay in the dark barracks, the sound of boots and muffled laughter filled the air. Somewhere far away, a distant thud shook the floor, like an explosion. No one reacted. Threx closed his eyes, but the human scream from earlier echoed in his mind. It wasn't the sound of someone afraid. It was the sound of someone fighting through fear. And for the first time in many years, the battle-hardened commander felt unsettled. The siren was not like yesterday's whistle. It was deep, loud, and sharp enough to make Threx's chest vibrate. The barracks shook as if the building itself was waking up in anger. Threx sat up fast. Around him, the human cadets were already moving. No one groaned. No one asked questions. They grabbed boots, strapped armor to their chests, and clipped knives to their belts. "What is happening?" Threx asked the young cadet from last night. She pulled her helmet on. "Break day." "You still haven't told me what that means." "You'll find out," she said, voice muffled through the helmet. "And if you can't keep moving, you'll wish you never came here." The doors slammed open. and the scarred instructor from yesterday stepped inside. Her eyes swept the room, landing on Threx. "You alien, up front." Threx rose, ignoring the ache in his muscles from yesterday's warm-up. He walked past the rows of cadets, all standing perfectly straight. The instructor's expression didn't change, but her voice cut through the air like a blade. "Break day is not a game. You will keep moving until your body fails. And when it fails, you will keep moving anyway. You will run until your legs give out, fight until your arms are numb, and push until your mind begs to stop. The weak will leave. The rest will become soldiers." Threx almost laughed. "That is impossible." She stepped closer until her face was inches from his. "Everything humans do is impossible until we do it." She turned to the others. Outside, now, the morning air was cold. A thin mist curled across the yard, turning the academy into a shadowy battlefield. Lines of cadets stood waiting, weapons in hand. Threx noticed something strange. No one had rifles or energy blasters today. Instead, they carried wooden staffs, heavy metal bars, or nothing at all. The instructor walked to the front, voice booming. "Break day begins in 3, 2, 1. Move." The lines exploded into chaos. Cadets sprinted across the yard, some vanishing into the mist, others climbing ropes to the upper levels of the walls. A boot slammed into the back of Threx's leg. "Run!" someone shouted. "They'll catch you if you don't." "Who?" Threx demanded. He got his answer when shapes appeared in the fog. Tall, armored figures with black visors. They carried stun batons that cracked with blue sparks. First armored figure swung at a cadet, hitting them in the ribs. The cadet fell and got up instantly, charging forward again. Threx's instincts screamed fight back, but the young cadet from the barracks grabbed his wrist. "Don't fight them yet. Survive first." They ran side by side through the mist, feet pounding the dirt. Threx's lungs burned. His alien body was strong, but the humans moved with a kind of relentless speed that was almost unnatural. The mist grew thicker. Shapes moved all around. Cadets fighting, falling, and getting back up again. Threx saw a small human boy leap onto an armored attacker's back, using his legs like a vice until the man crashed to the ground. Another cadet rolled under a swinging baton, jamming a staff between the attacker's knees to trip them. Why do they not stop when injured? Threx asked between breaths. The cadet beside him gave a short laugh. "Because stopping means you're dead. And nobody here wants to be dead." They reached the obstacle yard, but it was worse than yesterday. The pits of water were now filled with floating blocks of ice. The climbing walls dripped with some kind of slippery black oil. The barbed wire was lower, forcing them to crawl with their faces almost in the mud. Through it. The instructor's voice roared from somewhere above. Threx hesitated, staring at the freezing water. The cadet dove in without a second thought. Threx cursed in his native tongue and followed. The cold hit like a shock grenade, locking his muscles for a split second. But the fear of being left behind forced him to move. By the time they reached the other side, his fingers were numb. He tried to pull himself onto the bank, but his strength faltered. A hand grabbed his collar and yanked him out. Another cadet, breathing hard but still grinning. "Don't drown yet, alien. We've still got hours to go." "Hours?" Threx gasped. They pushed on. The armored figures hunted them through the course, swinging batons, knocking cadets down. Some cadets carried each other when one fell, refusing to let anyone stay behind. By midday, Threx's body screamed for rest. Every muscle felt like it was tearing. His legs shook. In the Vakari military, a soldier in this condition would be pulled from training immediately. Here, it was only the beginning. The sun was high when they reached the combat ring, a massive pit surrounded by wooden stands. Dozens of cadets stood in the dirt, waiting. Weapons, real ones, were scattered in the center. The instructor stood above, hands behind her back. You've run. You've climbed. You've bled. Now you fight. Threx stepped forward, chest heaving. This is not training. This is cruelty. The instructor's eyes were cold. This is survival. The galaxy does not care if you are tired. The enemy does not wait until you are ready. The fight begins whether you want it or not. She pointed to Threx. You first. He dropped into the ring. A human cadet faced him, taller than most, with arms like steel cables. They held no weapon, only clenched fists. The whistle blew. The cadet rushed forward. Threx sidestepped and swept his leg, but the human caught themselves, pivoted, and slammed a fist into Threx's ribs. Pain exploded through his chest. Threx reacted on instinct, grabbing the cadet's arm and twisting. The human didn't cry out. They rolled with the movement, breaking free, then tackled him to the ground. The dirt was in his mouth, in his eyes. He managed to push the cadet off, but his strength was fading. Another punch came, and this time it didn't stop. Punch after punch until the whistle finally blew. The cadet stood, breathing hard but steady. They reached down, offering Threx a hand. He took it, pulling himself up. You hit harder than most aliens, the cadet said. But you still stop to think too much. Out here, thinking slow means dying fast. The fights went on. Cadets rotated through opponents, switching weapons, facing multiple attackers at once. When someone fell, they were dragged up again. There were no outs, only more rounds. By the time the sun began to sink, Threx had fought 6 times. He was bruised, cut, and exhausted beyond measure. But every time he fell, something in him refused to stay down. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear of looking weak in front of these strange humans. The final challenge came at night. The mist returned, thicker than before. No torches, no lights. Only darkness. The instructor's voice echoed. Last trial. You will move across the yard, but there are hunters in the dark. If they catch you, you start over. Threx's frills twitched. Hunters? No answer. Only the whistle. He moved quickly, keeping low. Somewhere ahead, he heard footsteps, too light to be an armored attacker. A cadet, maybe. Then, a sudden weight slammed into him from the side. They hit the ground hard. A blade pressed to his throat. Dead. A voice whispered in his ear. The weight lifted, and the shadow vanished into the fog. He had to start over. Again and again, he crept forward, only to be caught. It wasn't just strength or speed the hunters used, it was silence. Humans could move like ghosts when they wanted to. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the far wall. He climbed over, landing hard on the other side. The instructor was waiting, arms crossed. You made it. Barely. Threx wanted to speak, but his throat was dry, his chest aching. She leaned closer. Now you understand. Break day is not about strength. It's about refusing to quit. The body will fail. The mind will lie to you. The only thing that keeps you moving is the will to keep going. That night in the barracks, Threx lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The cadets were quieter now, too tired to talk much. Some had bandages. Others had swollen eyes or bruised jaws. The young cadet from earlier looked over at him. Still think we're just primitive warriors? She asked. Threx didn't answer right away. He remembered the hunters in the dark. The cadet who fought with a dislocated arm. The faces of humans who refused to give up, no matter how much it hurt. Finally, he said, "No, you are something else entirely." The siren that woke them this time was different. It wasn't the sharp call of training or the bone-rattling scream of break day. This one was low, deep and steady, a sound that made the walls seem to hum with unease. Threx opened his eyes to find the barracks already in motion. Cadets grabbed weapons, strapped on armor, and moved with a speed that felt different from training. There was no chatter. No smirks, just focus. What is this? Threx asked, pushing himself up from His bunk. The young cadet from before, the one who had dragged him out of the icy water, glanced at him. Code Black, that means nothing to me. It will, she said, sliding a knife into her belt. Code Black means real threat. Not drills, not tests. The loudspeaker crackled again. Attention all units, this is not a drill. Secure. Formation and report to Central Yard. Repeat, Code Black. The scarred instructor stepped into the barracks doorway. Her face was hard, but her eyes moved quickly over each cadet. You have 2 minutes. If you're late, you'll wish the enemy got you before I do. No one wasted a second. Threx followed the line of humans into the cold morning air. Central Yard looked nothing like the last 2 days. Tall floodlights burned against the fading night, casting harsh white light over the space. Dozens of armored humans stood ready, rifles slung across their chests. The cadets formed ranks in front of them, standing straighter than Threx had ever seen. A man in dark gray armor stepped forward. His armor was heavier, his helmet tucked under one arm. He spoke loudly, his voice carrying over the yard, unidentified. Contacts were detected beyond the southern perimeter at 0400 hours. No communication, no IFF signal. Scouts dispatched to investigate have not returned, Threx frowned. IFF. The young cadet whispered. Identification, friend or foe. It's how we know who's ours, the officer continued. Until further notice, the academy is on lockdown, all gates sealed. Patrols doubled. Cadets, you will be divided into units and assist in securing the compound. Threx felt something shift in his chest. In the Vakari military, cadets were never given live duty before graduation. Humans apparently had no such rule. The scarred instructor began calling names, grouping cadets in teams of 5. When she reached Threx, she hesitated, only for a heartbeat, before adding him to a unit. Unit 4, South Sector. Stay sharp. The South Sector was quieter than Threx expected. The fence here was tall, reinforced with metal plates. Beyond it, a forest stretched into darkness. Mist clung to the trees, making it impossible to see far. 2 full soldiers stood. Guard, rifles ready. Their eyes scanned the forest without blinking. The cadets took positions along the fence. One checked a motion detector, another adjusted a mounted spotlight. Threx kept his gaze on the mist. The forest felt wrong. Not. Just silent, watching. Every instinct in him screamed that something was out there. Hours passed. The cold bit at his skin, even through the academy-issued armor. The cadet stayed quiet, moving only when necessary. Then, a flicker, a shadow between the trees. It was gone in less than a second. Did you see that? Threx asked, one cadet. Nodded slowly. Yeah, but I've learned something here, alien. If you see one, there are more you didn't see. The first sound came just after sunset. Not a roar, not a growl, just a soft click. Click. The soldiers stiffened. Positions! One barked. The clicking grew louder, moving through the trees like something circling the fence. The floodlights swiveled, beams slicing through. The mist, but nothing was there. A cadet muttered, I hate the quiet ones. Then the sound stopped. For a moment, everything was still. Then the fence behind them groaned. Metal screamed as something massive slammed into it. Threx turned in time to see a dent appear in the reinforced plating. Another hit, deeper this time. The fence shuddered. The soldiers raised their rifles. Stay back, one ordered. Do not fire unless. The third impact ripped a section of plating free. Something long and pale darted through the gap. It moved too fast for Threx to see clearly. A blur of claws and teeth. A soldier fired. Sparks lit the mist. The thing screeched and vanished back into the trees. The cadets regrouped quickly. Spotlights swept the fence line. The scarred instructor's voice came through the coms. All units, hostile contact confirmed. Maintain position. Do not pursue into the forest. Threx frowned. Why not pursue? We can end it now. One cadet looked at him like he'd just suggested breathing underwater. You don't go into the mist at night. The rest of the night was a blur of tension. Shapes moved in the trees. Sometimes there was clicking, sometimes nothing. But every so often, the fence shuddered under another hit. By dawn, the attack stopped. The forest was quiet again, too quiet. The soldiers finally gave the order to stand down. Cadets slumped against the fence, exhausted. The young cadet glanced at Threx. You're wondering what they were. Yes, so am I, and that's the problem. Humans don't like not knowing. Back in Central Yard, the officer in gray armor addressed them again. Last night was not a random attack. Whatever they were testing us, testing the fence, our patrol speed, our response time. Threx asked, then they will return? The officer's expression was grim. Yes, and next time they won't just be testing. That afternoon, the cadets trained harder than before. No obstacle courses, no break day drills. Instead, they practiced defensive formations, quick barricade construction, and night fighting tactics. Rifles were issued, not training rifles, but real weapons. Threx held one awkwardly. Human rifles were heavier than Vicari plasma casters, and the recoil was worse. But the humans fired them with calm precision, hitting targets at ranges Threx found impressive. By evening, the mist began to creep in again. The fence lights snapped on. Every cadet was armed. The clicking started earlier this time. That night would be worse. Much worse. Because the unseen enemy wasn't planning to test the humans anymore. They were coming to break them. And Threx, who once believed humans were simply stubborn warriors, was about to see just how terrifying that stubbornness could become when survival was on the line. The night was dark, thick with mist and silence. The floodlights along the fence flickered uncertainly, casting long shadows that twisted and danced like ghosts. The academy was tense, every soldier and cadet alert, waiting for the first sign of trouble. Commander Threx stood among the cadets, his eyes sharp despite the exhaustion weighing on his body. He still did not fully understand the enemy they faced, these pale, fast creatures that moved unseen, attacking only when least expected. Suddenly, the silence was broken. A sudden crash echoed from the south sector fence. The ground shook beneath their feet as if a giant had thrown a punch. Contact! Someone shouted. Enemy at the fence, get ready to engage. The cadets snapped into action. Threx could see the scarred instructor bark orders, her voice sharp and steady. Form! Up! Don't fire until they cross the line. The fence shuddered again, metal groaning as something tried to tear through. Threx's heart pounded. He gripped his rifle tighter, his alien fingers curling around the cold metal. From the mist, 3 pale figures appeared. Their bodies were thin, almost translucent, but fast, too fast for human eyes to track. One leapt forward, claws extended. A cadet fired. The bullet tore through the air, hitting the creature's shoulder. But it didn't slow. It slashed at the cadet's arm, tearing fabric and flesh. The soldier cried out but kept firing. Threx reacted instinctively. He aimed and fired, the rifle kicking hard against his shoulder. His shot struck the creature's leg, and it stumbled, but it recovered quickly, spinning and lunging at another cadet. Chaos exploded. The creatures moved like shadows, striking from every direction. Cadets shouted, some fell. Others fought back. With fists and knives, Threx ducked a swipe, felt the wind as claws brushed his armor. He punched forward, hitting thin flesh that felt colder than ice. The battle was fast and brutal. Unlike any fight Threx had known, amid the chaos, a strange thing happened. One of the creatures suddenly stopped. It stared at Threx with glowing eyes, cold, empty, yet full of something ancient. Threx froze. The creature tilted its head, as if studying him. Then, without warning, it lunged. Threx rolled to the side, barely avoiding the strike. His heart slammed against his ribs. The fight lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. When the last creature fled back into the mist, the cadets gathered their wounded and regrouped. Several had deep cuts, some were unconscious, the scarred. Instructor stood before them, breathing hard. She looked at Threx. You saw what they are capable of. They don't just fight, they hunt. Threx nodded, still trying to calm his racing heart. Later, in the dim light of the barracks, Threx sat quietly. The young cadet from before sat beside him. They're called the Valen, she said softly. Threx looked up. The Valen? She nodded. Creatures no one wants to talk about. They are the nightmare that stalks the edges of our worlds. Threx listened as she told stories. Stories of villages wiped out in one night, of soldiers who vanished without a trace, of families lost to creatures no one could catch. How do humans fight something they can't see? He asked. The cadet smiled bitterly. We don't fight the way you think. We fight with fear. The words hit Threx like a blow. Fear? Yes, she leaned closer, eyes shining with a strange light. We don't pretend to be fearless. We learn to use fear as fuel, to turn it into strength. Threx frowned. He had never heard of such training. Show me, he said. The cadet stood. Tomorrow you'll see. The next morning was cold and clear. Threx woke to find the academy preparing for another trial, one he knew would test more than his body. The scarred instructor led them to a large dark room. Inside, the air was thick and heavy. Walls were padded and no light entered. This is the fear lesson, the instructor said. Threx looked around. What is the purpose? To teach you to control the thing that kills most soldiers, fear itself. The cadets were given no weapons, only a small light that could be turned on and off. The instructor's voice echoed in the dark. You will face your worst fears here. The shadows will come alive. The monsters will try to break you. Threx swallowed hard. The trial began. Shadows moved across the walls. Sounds whispered in the dark. Cold fingers brushed his skin. His mind raced with images, creatures from nightmares, screams, failures. At first, he wanted to run. His heart hammered in his chest. But then he remembered the cadet's words. Fear as fuel. He focused on breathing. Slow, steady, strong. He turned. On his light, bright and steady, the shadows retreated. The voices faded. Threx stood firm. Hours passed. One by one, the cadets faced their fears and returned. Some wept, some screamed. Some laughed, but all survived. Afterward, the scarred instructor looked at Threx. You are stronger than you think. But this lesson is just the beginning. Threx nodded. He felt different, as if something inside had changed. That night, the alarm sounded again. This time, the academy was ready. Cadets armed themselves quickly. The fence was lined with soldiers, rifles aimed and ready. The Valen came again, faster, smarter, more dangerous. But humans stood their ground. Threx watched as cadets fought with brutal skill. They used traps, fire, and teamwork. The creatures tried to break through but failed. One cadet with a broken leg kept fighting, dragging herself forward. Another used a flamethrower to scare the creatures back. The battle raged for hours. Threx realized the humans did not just survive, they thrived. In the face of terror, their fear was no weakness. It was their greatest weapon. As dawn broke, the creatures retreated. The academy was battered but standing. Threx looked at the scarred instructor. How do you make warriors like this? She smiled grimly. We don't make warriors. We make survivors. The quiet after the battle felt strange. The academy was still standing, but the air was heavy, thick with tension and unanswered questions. Commander Threx sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the small holoscreen in his hands. The message was simple but terrifying. Unknown fleet detected approaching Earth system. His three-fingered hand trembled slightly. For the first time, he felt the weight of what was coming. The Academy commander called an emergency meeting. All senior officers and cadet leaders gathered in the command hall, a large room, filled with holoscreens showing the approaching fleet. The fleet was huge, dozens of warships, some massive and heavily armed. Their colors were dark, almost black, and their shape was unfamiliar. No known species had ever sent such a fleet toward Earth. Commander Holly stood at the front, his face grim. "This is not a training exercise. This is real. We do not know their intentions, but we must assume the worst. Prepare all forces for battle." Threx listened carefully. The humans seemed calm, but their eyes told a different story, a mix of fear, determination, and something else. He recognized it. It was hope. The cadets were ordered to the armory. Threx followed, feeling the familiar weight of armor and weapons settle over his body. He had fought many battles before, but nothing like this. The humans around him were different. They moved with purpose, their steps sure even in fear. A young cadet named Lyra approached him. "Ready, Commander?" Threx nodded. "As ready as I will ever be." Outside, the Academy prepared for war. Starfighters lined the launch bays, engines humming quietly. The great warships were ready to leap into space at a moment's notice. Threx looked up at the sky, stars shining cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the enemy fleet was coming closer. Suddenly, alarms blared across the Academy. Holoscreens flashed red warnings. Hostile ships detected within sublight range. The announcer's voice warned. Threx's heart pounded. The real battle was about to begin. Commander Holly ordered all units to their positions. "Prepare for immediate deployment. Starfighters ready to launch on my command." The cadets and soldiers moved quickly, some heading for shuttles, others to defensive posts. Threx joined a group moving toward a sleek fighter craft. Lyra was already inside, strapping in. "Let's show them what humans can do," she said with a fierce smile. Threx smiled back, feeling a spark of courage. The fighter's engines roared as it blasted into space. The stars stretched and blurred as they accelerated. Outside, the dark shapes of enemy warships loomed closer. The first shots rang out. Energy blasts lit the void, striking shields and hulls. Threx gripped the controls tightly, heart racing. His training kicked in, targeting, evading, firing. A smaller enemy fighter dove toward them, weapons blazing. Lyra shouted, "Cover me!" Threx banked left, firing bursts of plasma that tore through the enemy's shield. The enemy craft exploded in a ball of fire. The battle was fierce. Ships twisted and turned, weaving between blasts. Threx saw a massive warship unleash a barrage of missiles at the Academy's main fleet. Explosions rocked the larger ships. Fire and smoke filled the view screens. Despite the chaos, the humans fought with skill and courage. They worked as a team, covering each other, sharing targets. Threx found himself fighting alongside Lyra and others he had trained with. They were more than soldiers. They were a family. As the battle raged, Threx spotted something strange. The enemy ships moved with a strange rhythm, almost like they were connected, acting as one. He radioed his squadron leader. "There's a pattern to their attacks. They're coordinated, maybe linked." Lyra responded, "We've seen this before. They use a hive mind, very dangerous." Threx's mind raced. Fighting an enemy that thinks together was something new. Suddenly, his fighter shook violently. A missile had struck. Warning lights flashed. Threx struggled to keep control. He managed to stabilize, but his shields were down. The enemy was closing in. Threx saw another fighter on his tail. He rolled hard, firing his last energy blast. The enemy craft spiraled out of control and exploded. Threx exhaled deeply, but he knew the fight was far from over. Back on the ground, the Academy's defenses held firm. Missile batteries and laser turrets fired relentlessly at the invading fleet. The scarred instructor watched the battle through a holoscreen. "This is only the beginning," she said quietly. But Earth will not fall today. Hours passed like minutes. The enemy fleet pressed their attack. Suddenly, a huge explosion rocked one of the Academy's main ships. Commander Hale's voice came over the comms, steady but fierce. "We've lost the Vanguard. Fall back and regroup." Threx felt a pang of sorrow. The Vanguard was one of the Academy's finest warships, but the fight was not over. Night fell on the battlefield. The stars shone cold and distant. Threx and his squadron regrouped near a larger human cruiser. They prepared for another assault. Before the next wave, Threx spoke to Lyra. "We fight not just for survival, but for our future." Lyra nodded, eyes bright. "We are humans," she said. "Fear does not stop us. It drives us." The next battle was even harder. Enemy ships came in greater numbers, firing faster, pushing harder. Threx's fighter took damage, but he pushed on. Suddenly, an alarm blared inside his cockpit. Warning, critical damage. His systems were failing. Threx knew. He had seconds to act. He aimed his fighter at an enemy battleship and fired his last missile. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash. Threx's fighter spun out of control. He ejected just before it crashed into the dark void. He drifted in his suit, watching the battle rage below. He heard radio chatter. His squadron was still fighting. Rescue ships arrived quickly. Threx was pulled aboard, bruised but alive. Back at the Academy, the commanders gathered. "We must prepare for the long fight." Commander Hale said that the enemy fleet was vast and relentless, but the humans had something stronger, their spirit. Threx looked at the young cadets around him. They were tired, scared, but unbroken. He smiled to himself. Humans might be fragile in body, but in spirit, they were warriors unlike any he had ever known. The air in the command center was thick with tension. Commander Threx stood beside Commander Hall, watching the holoscreens flicker with images of the enemy fleet. Ships moved like shadows across the stars, closing in fast. "We cannot hold them forever," Hale said quietly. "But we have one chance, a secret weapon." Threx turned, eyes wide. "What kind of weapon?" Hale nodded toward a small chamber behind them. "It is still being prepared, but it may change everything." In the chamber, engineers worked quickly. A strange device hummed softly, glowing with energy. It was unlike anything Threx had seen before, a mix of human technology and something older, deeper. The humans called it the catalyst. Hale explained. "The catalyst can disrupt the enemy's hive mind. It will scramble their coordination, make them fight like individuals, confused and weak." Threx's mind raced. An enemy that thinks as one was terrifying. If this weapon worked, it could turn the tide. The cadets trained harder than ever. They practiced fighting alongside the catalyst's effects. They learned new tactics, quick strikes, rapid retreats, and coordinated attacks. Threx felt stronger each day. His respect for these humans grew deeper. Finally, the day came. The enemy fleet was near Earth's orbit. The sky above the Academy filled with warships, dark looming, deadly. The humans prepared for the final battle. Threx stood on the bridge of a human battleship. The catalyst was ready. Hale's voice came over the comms. "This is it. Deploy the catalyst. Give humanity a chance." The device powered up. A wave of energy spread through space, pulsing like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the enemy ships faltered. Their movements became jerky and uncoordinated. Shields flickered, weapons misfired. "Now," Hale ordered. The human fleet attacked with renewed strength. Threx flew his fighter at full speed, firing on enemy ships that stumbled. The battle was fierce. Explosions lit the darkness. The hum of engines and weapons filled the void. The enemy fought back hard, but the catalyst's effect was clear. They lost their advantage. They fought like scattered warriors, not a single hive mind. In the chaos, Threx saw a large enemy command ship. It seemed to pulse with energy, a dark heart of the fleet. He radioed Hale. That ship must be destroyed. It's the source of their hive mind. Holly agreed. Take a squad and strike hard. Threx led. His team threw enemy fire. Missiles streaked past, and lasers cut the dark space dot. They reached the command ship's shield. Threx fired a plasma blast, breaching the barrier. Inside, the ship was a maze of dark corridors and glowing consoles. Threx and his squad moved carefully. Suddenly, the enemy appeared, fierce warriors with glowing eyes and sharp claws. A brutal fight broke out. Threx fought with everything he had. His alien strength and human training combined. One by one, the enemies fell. They reached the core chamber, the heart of the hive mind. Threx placed explosives around the chamber. The squad retreated just as the charges detonated. The explosion rocked the ship, sending debris into space. Outside, the enemy fleet faltered even more. Without their command ship, their coordination was gone. The humans pressed their attack, driving the enemy back. Back on the battleship bridge, Holly smiled. We did it. They are retreating. Threx exhaled deeply. The battle was won, but the war had changed them all. The humans gathered in the command center. Holly addressed them. This victory shows what humans can do when they never give up. Threx looked around. He saw the faces of warriors, tired, scarred, but unbroken. That night, Threx walked outside the academy. The stars shone brightly overhead. He thought about the journey, the training, the battles, the fear, and the hope. He realized humans were more than fighters. They were survivors. They were something special. Final cliffhanger. A new message came in from deep space. A warning. An ancient force awakens. Threx's eyes narrowed. The true test was just beginning.